One of the first things you got me working on was my life course. That was such an immediate thing that can change your life. And
I'm gonna stop because as you can see right now, what I'm gonna do on this episode, Hey Stella with Mihaela. Hi everybody. This is episode 61. It is going to be a breakdown on the documentary film that the famous actor Jonah Hill is paying tribute to his therapist, Dr. Phil Stutz. That's the name of the film, Stutz, on Netflix documentary. If you have not seen it, you should see it. When I watched it twice, actually, and then I took notes, I couldn't believe the tools that Dr. Phil Stutz is talking about and found the similarities between his therapeutic tools to the acting tools. Even from the very introduction, the first moment that Jonah Hill is sitting in the chair, Dr. Stutz goes, okay, go ahead, entertain me. So that's already taken the path of a creative way into therapy. He talks about how in the past the traditional therapists were doing stuff and things like a patient comes in, the therapist wants to stay a little bit detached, you're kind of listening to what the patient is saying, you're going back into the past, you're going back into things that the patient is discussing, but they never became participants. The therapist doesn't become a participant. The way that he is designed and the way that Dr. Stutz, over the years was able to understand what each patient needs was that they want more active solutions. They want more active tools. And they are so in link with some of the tools that we use as actors, some of the tools that I use as an acting coach, with the actors that I work with the directors, with the playwrights. And it blew my mind when I watched it. I couldn't believe it. There's not a point where Jonah Hill makes a link between the therapy tools with the acting tools. But I think that was a choice that he made. This is just my opinion. I don't know any of these people because he wants to keep his acting away from this film, because this film is a beautiful tribute to the therapist that he considers to have changed his life. When asked, why do you think I want to make this movie about you? Jonah Hill says, because I know your tools have helped me, have benefited me a lot. And I'm hoping that by putting them out there in a film, other people will have the same benefit when they will learn how to put them in practice. Does that make sense? Active. How are you using the tools? How did you come up with these tools that are different than any of the old traditional tools for therapy? And what Dr. Phil says is he draws images, he has the patients visualize rather than just sit in the chair across from him and talk and talk and talk. Because as many times as I can remember, I keep saying to all my actors, to all the artists that I work with, theory is not acting. Acting is not done theoretically. Yes, of course, you have to do the script analysis in the beginning to find out all the ins and outs of the character, but then you have to get up on your feet and you have to act. Action. So what he does, he draws images that he hands over to the patients when they leave. They have a direct contact to that, which is the tool, and they can play it, they can do it themselves rather than him just telling them in words what to do, because words sometimes don't click as well in our minds. Images do. Actors have to think in images all the time. They can bring back images from their past. They can be personal or they can be imaginary, but there are so many vivid images that actors have to work with. That takes us to why I consider that acting tools are even more powerful than therapy tools. All of the things that I see in this film, and I'm not saying that that's all he uses in his practice. I'm sure he has a lot more, but this film is only an hour and something. So I'm sure he can go through all of the tools that he has and he has been using with his patients. But the ones that he's presenting here in this film, they're all using only the sense of sight, visualization, where actors have to use all of the five senses. They have to use visualization, they have to use the sense of smell, the sense of taste, the sense of touch, the sense of hearing. Actors go much more deeper. into the tools than the ones that are being presented in this film. So I think they're very creative, and I do think that he's a very creative person. How was he able to come up with all of these? Another question that Jonah Hill asks him. And he says something that I feel that I'm doing as an acting coach. Over the years, he was able to sit across from the patient and realize that each patient is different. Each patient comes in with different needs to try to solve their life for the better. So they all needed to be paid attention to and to be given tools that will benefit them. So in putting himself in the shoes of the patient, which is what I do, I put myself in the shoes of the characters when I'm an actress. And when I'm an acting coach, I put myself in the shoes of the person that I'm trying to help, the artist that I'm trying to help. And by allowing myself to relate to that, what they are going through in trying to discover a character, trying to find what's blocking them, trying to find the obstacles that they have as people first before they are characters, I can sense and I can direct them and I can guide them to what I think in the moment each one of those artists needs. So you can't have anybody read a book on acting. You can read as many books on acting as you want if you want to teach acting. And then when you go to teach, it's a completely different experience. Books and theory, they're very helpful in the beginning. I used to read tons of them. I still do. But I think the experience of me working with actors has given me that understanding because it was done in practice. So now I know when I work with an individual, what that individual needs, where do I have to take them? Do I want them to use the visualization? Do I want them to use the sense of smell? Do I want them to use the sense of taste? Do I want them to use the sense of hearing? Do I want them to use the sense of touch? Depending on what I can see in real time that the actor is having a problem with. So our acting tools are deeper than what they're actually going through in the documentary, because we use all of our senses. The foundation of method acting, which is what I was trained in, and that is what I teach, my understanding of method acting that comes from the actor studio where I'm a member for a long time, is that the most important thing for actors that they have to always go back to, the foundation of the method actor, is sensory work. Sensory work means exactly that, which they are talking about, but they're not calling it sensory work. So this is where I'm trying to make the link between their tools, the therapy tools, and to let you know how if you change the term of what they are actually creative acting tools that actors have to train in. That's why I say acting is the closest manual to life. Acting teaches us the most how to navigate our life through our characters. Acting gives us all the tools that we can take, even if we're not actors, even if we are any other profession. They are still very beneficial to everybody because they give you a guide, they give you a blueprint of how to go about in discovering the character, but at the same time, because the actors are the only instrument that they have, not outside of themselves, the whole work is going to be on that instrument: physical, emotional, psychological, social. Therefore, that's why it can change the world if people would be more aware of how important these acting tools are. He's already saying that when working with his patients as a therapy. He says, if you come into my office and if you do what I tell you to do what the fuck I'm telling you to do, and I guarantee you that it will help you. You will be helped. You will feel much more a master of your own life because you will have something at your fingertips. I call them acting tips at fingertips in how to navigate your life and how to go about it. And he talks about the tools being very active. What other craft, what other thing, what other profession in this world has more to do with action than acting? Crazy, right? The fact that he is trying to share this movie with as many people as he can. I'm talking about Jonah Hill, such a known actor. He will never have to do anything like this because his career is at a high level where everybody wants to get to. But that demonstrates that even getting there, you think that your life is going to feel happy and amazing all the time. But it shows us differently that it's not. No matter what level of career we get to, no matter what level of success we get to, we're always going to have to train. We're always going to have to work on how to make our life have better or more happy moments than sad, because it's never going to get to the final product. They will talk about it later, where you get to a point because you've done all these tools and everything is going to be okay. Or as an actor, you get to a point where you've understood the character, you've dug into the character, you've explored the character, you've done all of the tools that are required in order to make the character a successful human being with feelings, with human behavior that's going to identify, that's going to make the audiences relate to. But then when you go back to start a new role, a new character, you have to start everything from zero. So everything is the same as what they're talking about, but they're not involving acting. And I am just making the link between the two. Does that make any sense? I hope it makes sense. Yeah. This is absolutely, I wanted to do this episode after I saw the movie about a week ago, and I watched it, like I said, 2 times. And it's been one of the hardest episodes because I have to pay so much attention to what they're saying. And I'm trying to go concrete moment by moment in trying to link therapy tools to acting tools and give you the different terms. So like I said, he uses visualization so far in what he describes that the tools are when he works with patients. And I'm saying those are called sensory work tools. Sensory work, actors use all of the senses. They're basing all of what they're doing in this particular film on just visualization, on the sense of sight. So I think when he talks about the life force is about the being curious. For actors, it would be, you have to be curious. You have to go back into your creative side, which is the little child inside us all. That's our creative part. And we have to go back to being those children that we were once and care and be curious and want to keep on learning. The 3 phases of the life force. First one is the physical, taking care of your body, doing a great diet for yourself. That's the training of actors. That's why actors have to train physically, because the more they are physically ready, the more the emotions are going to be coming out, because their instrument is going to be tuned. There's going to be release of tension in the body if you work physically on your body. There's not going to be tension in the body if you're not working out. It would be. So in order to be able to get to the emotional part, in order to get to the second tier, as they're talking about, which is relationship with others, you have to have a physically open, relaxed, ready to go instrument. What better way than doing that than to have your instrument, the physical part of you, be in the best shape that it can possibly be? And the way that you put it is because of what I just said. You're not saying to an actor, you have to lose weight because you feel fat or you look too fat for the character. In the way that Jonah Hill explained that he was feeling growing up, the way that he was made to feel about his weight was not the same way that the therapist, Dr. Stutz, is telling him the importance of the physical aspect of who we are. It's completely a different understanding of it. So it doesn't make you feel like there's something wrong with you by saying, you're too fat. Can you lose weight? Oh, you have this on your nose. Can I remove that from your nose? Can I make your nose smaller? That's already like going against an actor and putting him down. That's not going to be opening his physical instrument to be able to give you, the director, that which is what you want in the next year, which is have relationships with others. Have relationship with others is something that we as actors have to want to do. We have to be compassionate towards the person that we're playing with, because what if the character are having a chemistry, are in love, we've known each other for so many years, we have a background that's together for a long time, but as actors we don't know each other, we just met on the set of a film or on the stage. And if the actor doesn't appeal to you, maybe you're just annoyed by him, you can't just say, I'm gonna turn around and leave because I don't like the actor that's being cast to play with me or to play opposite. So you have to create relationship. You have to take an initiative as an actor to be able to make that person the one that you might not like in the beginning. Be someone, find something in that person that you are going to find that's beautiful. That is called substitution. Substitution for an actor is when they have to endow the other actor with a personal someone or even an object from your life that's going to make you smile like it's making me smile right now. I give the example all the time. I was doing this work at the actor studio with this actor and he was annoying me all the time. And I couldn't even use anybody from my life because that did not work. That substitution with somebody from my personal life being placed on him did not even work. So then for me to want to kiss this actor that I hated, that I did not like, all I did was I imagined, again, going back to the senses, I visualized a peach, a beautiful, juicy peach. And then I could smell the peach. I could taste the juiciness. And I saw him as that peach that I wanted to go and bite into. So therefore, if I would have been asked by the director to go ahead and kiss the actor, whom at the beginning I could not stand, now him becoming the peach for me by doing the sensory work and making that peach real, placing it on his face or imagining it to be his head, I wouldn't have a problem going and biting into it or kissing it. Sensory, using the sense of taste, using the sense of visualization of sight, using the sense of taste and smell. You get it? So you form relationships with people as actors that you do not like. How can that not be something that's going to better your life if you try to put the same initiative in trying to keep relationships or to make relationships with people in your life that you don't like? All of these crazy things that are happening in the world right now, the political people being on one side and the opposite being on the other side, that would not exist, because if you would apply this tool of initiate relationship with people that you might not think you like in the beginning, will make you realize that even with somebody that you might think you don't like at all in the beginning, you will have something to find in common with them. After I saw that peach on my actor friend that I was working with, afterwards, he doesn't have to know that that's what I did in order for me to be able to kiss him. But afterwards, after having that experience of me using those senses in order to be able to kiss me and to allow him to kiss me, already that person becomes someone that I like, because in my experience, I created this rapport, I created this relationship with him that's even funny. So now when I see that person all the time, he puts a smile on my face and he doesn't even have to know why. You don't have to explain to him that you made his head into a peach that you want to bite into. So this tool, again, the relationship with the other people that you might not like, is so important, because like he said, by being curious about getting to know people whom you might think are so completely opposite or have opposite beliefs, will create a place of compassion inside of you. Therefore, it will create a place of compassion inside of them, and the world would be a better place, because he doesn't just represent himself, he represents the connection between all of us as human beings. The third one that he goes to is have a relationship with yourself. A relationship with yourself demands of you as an actor to be able to get to know you at a level that you might not have to in everyday life. As an actor, you have to find so many different sides that we have as people, explore them with the flaws, with the qualities, so you can tap into what is needed for the next character that you are going to play. Because you have to remember, the characters are complex human beings. So you have to put yourself in a situation where you give it all, where you train to find all of who you are, not just the two versions of ourselves, the very two mediocre versions of ourselves that we present in society in everyday life. As an actor, you have to tap into everything that you've got in the present moment. And the more you keep going and going and going by doing this practice, the more in depth you can go within yourself and discover a relationship with who you are, and get in touch with the greatness inside of you that I talk about all the time, but also get in touch with the flaws and admit them, rather than try to hide them and say, I don't have any flaws, I'm a perfect human being. So that's exactly what they're talking about, but they're not going into it in depth to make the connection between that, what they're talking about, to be of help in therapy, to also be of such importance for actors, and to say that actors are using these tools for longer than Dr. Phil ever can imagine that he came up with the tools. These tools go back to before he came up with them. They go back to Stanislavski. They go back to Strasberg. They're still being done at the actor studio. To find the passion, I think he said it in the last segment that you have to use the life force and have all the three tiers at use to be able to find what your passion is. So he talks about passion. Passion is not just for artists. Passion is for every person in every profession. You don't have to wait around to say, you don't have to find excuses by saying, well, I'm not an artist, therefore I can't be creative. Nowadays, creativity is required in any kind of field. They're actually hiring creative people in business companies, in all sorts of companies that have that at first you would think they have nothing to do with creativity. Passion is what keeps somebody alive at all times. Passion, passion, passion. How do you know how to do that? And I went into it a little bit, so I'm not going to say too much, but he's had this kind of instinctual understanding of wanting to provide action for his patients. He didn't want to just sit back and listen to them and not give them something, not give them a tool that's palpable, that's concrete, which are the exercises that I was talking about in acting also. You have to have them visualize, you have to have them smell the peach, you have to have them taste the peach, you have to have them touch the peach, soft, hard, depending how it is. That's active tools. You're not just saying, well, let's just talk about the peach without actually doing the active part of the sensory work, which the sensory work requires of the actors to do. And like I said, having years of experience, the more I work with actors, the more I understood how to place myself in what they were going. So then I could come up with actions, with solutions in the moment of what I thought was going to help them overcome the fear of them raising up to the character, which maybe was so great, but they have not yet felt great themselves. So we had to work towards finding that greatness inside of them. How do you find that greatness inside of you when you don't feel you have it? It can be a myriad of tools. One of them would be to raise up, don't sit down, start walking, put your shoulders back, raise your head up high rather than bow and be a victim, and just walk around and repeat, I am great. I am great. I am great. I don't have to prove to anybody why I'm great. I already am great because everybody is great. Everybody's great and everybody's bad at the same time. So we already have all of these things inside of us, but because of the conditioning in society and the training that it's not being done in schools, the education is not on that, we have to get to a point in our lives as adults and we have to unlearn everything that was taught, which was wrong, and relearn everything that they're talking about or everything that acting is giving us as tools. This segment talks about the personal backstory that we all have, our own experiences with loss and grief, our own experiences in relation with our parents, and how those experiences form us. In order to be able to recreate and maybe some scenarios from those experiences must be given a different ending. And that's what actors have the privilege to be able to do by using their imagination. They could actually heal some of the experiences that were done wrongly in the past and feel a little bit more at peace with them. That is the responsibility that actors have in order to build on their characters. Going back into the personal life of actors, which some of the people, some of the acting coaches disagree with, they say actors should only use imagination because the personal experiences are damaging. I just consider that to be it doesn't make sense to me, because even if you decide to go into creating a character and use only your imagination, you can't separate the part of you with your personal background and your personal experiences and who your parents are and what the relationship was. The same with me, my relationship with my dad, who happened to be a priest, and my mom working for the church and growing up in a country like Romania, who used to be a communist country. The discipline that we were required to be under all the time, because we felt like we were under a microscope, my sister and I, while growing up in these communities where people looked up to the priest and the wife and the children. That had so much impact, and this is not to blame the parents, as he will go further to talk about that it's not to blame the parents. They do the best that they know how to do. But at the same time, as an actor, as he says, as a human being, you have to deal with that. He's not saying that, but I'm paraphrasing. You have to deal with that, and acting provides you that beautiful open space, safe space where you can do that. You can mend relationships that you have with your parents from the past by imagining in the moment of being a character, talking to another character who doesn't necessarily play your father, but it could be any other character, depending of the scenario. If you are going to ask, for instance, a character to ask of you to forgive them, I would automatically put the face of my dad. I would substitute for my dad, or I would substitute for my mom in those scenarios when I'm playing a role. My parents don't have to know. I don't have to hurt them by saying this is the relationship that we had, and maybe, at moments you could have done differently in the way that our relationship was. They don't even have to know. I can do it with the characters that I'm playing, through the character that I'm playing. But to not take into consideration the personal baggage or the personal beautiful experiences that you come with makes no sense, because then you're going to bring yourself to the stage or in front of the camera as a half human. If you're denying who you are, you can be proud of who you are. You can also mend some of the things that you're not so proud about in acting, through work on your feet, in rehearsal with another character, exercises in a classroom, by, again, mending and doing an improvisation where you can play with the other characters and ask of them what you need, and they can give that back to you. And then your imagination allows for you as an actor to be seeing that as if it was coming from the people in your life that you needed the most. And it's such a beautiful state of mind change. Like he talks about that. These tools change your state of mind from being, oh, I never got for somebody that I love to tell me that they apologize for something that they've done to me. But you can do it through acting. You can do it with acting tools, such as I explained. But denying the backstory, denying your personal life, that makes no sense. Another thing that he talks about, which is so sad, is loss. He lost his brother when he was very young. His brother was only 3 years old. And it was denied. It was not talked about by his parents, because that's how I remember the one person that brought me up, that I felt I had the most loving relationship with, and she protected me and took care of me and raised me, was my grandmother. And I remember when we discovered that she was sick with cancer, it was very late. She was in the very late stage of the cancer, because in the village in Transylvania where I'm from, people were still hiding being sick as if it was something that they did wrong. So she didn't tell anybody that she was going through these difficult stages of her life. And when we discovered that she had breast cancer, it was too late and she passed. To this day, she's part of me in everything that I do creatively. She's part of me in my heart, in my thoughts. I cherish her in her death, and I thank her for all of the moments that I was able to create on stage that had to do with any kind of requiring of the character to go to a place that was scary for me to go to, but having my grandmother and allowing myself to sometimes thank her in the way that I never had the opportunity to thank her, or I was too small as a child to know that I have to thank her. So I can provide those closures. I can provide those moments of closure where I can thank her for everything that she's done for me when I was a little girl through the characters that I play. Even if across the stage from me is an actor that doesn't represent my grandmother, but it's up to my imagination and it's up to my sensory who that person is and what I need in that moment to make the character be not afraid to go into a moment of loss, which is difficult for anybody, even if you do it in a fictional environment or even if you do it in life. It's a painful situation. So I'm recreating, I'm reliving my guilt that has to do with her in not being able to have said thank you. I'm redoing it and I'm thanking her as many times as I have the opportunity through acting, through the characters that I play. So that changes again the scenario and it gives me a little bit more of a closure, and I don't feel as guilty for not having been able to do it when she was alive. He talks about going back to the place that he remembers he was at when his parents came home from the hospital and realized and told him that his brother had died. So he goes back to the same place. For people to say, I'm going to stay away from that memory, I'm going to stay away from those personal moments that are so difficult, why would I put myself through that pain? Because if you don't put yourself through that pain, if you don't return physically in the real location like Dr. Phil Stutz does, you return to it on a stage by creating the space where you last, in my case, where I last saw my grandmother, which I remember was on the bench in the hospital where she was in before I had come back to the United States. And I remember sitting on the bench and I was surrounded by flowers. So if I close my eyes when I'm on stage, even though I'm sitting on a stage at the actor's studio, or if I'm on a set, if I close my eyes for a second and then I open my eyes and I visualize the location of the set to be that of the garden, and next to me on the bench the partner who's there, or maybe even if I don't have a partner, if I'm doing a monologue, I imagine my grandmother, I take her from the bench in my imagination and I place her in front of me, and the fourth wall becomes her looking back at me and telling me how much she loves me, telling me how she adored taking care of me, telling me what a little wonderful girl I was, and telling me not to be sad. That she was so grateful and she was so happy to take care of me for the time that we had together. So if I do that right now, even if I give myself that, where I'm using the location of the garden and the chair where I'm sitting right now is, of course, in my apartment. It's not the garden where I last saw her. But if I use the sense of touch again and I imagine the bench to be bigger than my seat, I imagine it to be lower in the back than the chair where I'm sitting right now. I can have the smell of the flowers, these beautiful flowers. I don't know what they're called in English, bougeoir, of all different colors. That smell is with me all the time. And then another thing that comes to me, which that's what we do with images they were talking about, that moment is also not just the moment that I'm focusing on, because by allowing myself to feel free into creating that moment, another moment when I use the sense of smell comes to me, imagining her washing her hair. I imagine her washing her hair. And during that time in Romania, there were no conditioning shampoos. So she used to mix a little bit of warm water with vinegar in order to brush her hair so it wouldn't be tangled. So when I close my eyes for a second and then I look at her, who's in the garden, and now she's washing her hair with the vinegar and the lukewarm water, that gives me a sense of joy. It doesn't mean that just because I'm doing this exercise, I'm going to feel the same grief and loss that I felt when I heard of her passing. There is a little bit of sadness, but there's also this beautiful feeling of knowing that I'm always with her. She's in my gift box in my heart, and I go to her anytime I need to creatively. And that is such a wonderful thing for actors to be able to do. You know, the part X of ourselves, the part that we do not like. I read somewhere in a book that the brain is so much more conditioned to go to the negative thoughts than to go to the positive. For us to be able to have more positive thoughts about ourselves, we have to work harder. He talks about that. And I mentioned that to the actors that I work with all the time. If you do not allow an obstacle as a character to overcome, then nobody's going to identify with you as the character. Because if you do not have obstacles to overcome, there's no growth in you as a person, as a character. And that's exactly what they're saying. At first, you can look at part X, which is the part that we we consider it to be the worst in ourselves. But then we can, if we have these tools that he's talking about, or if we have the acting tools that I'm talking about to be the closest manual to guiding us how to live life. Again, I have to say that having those tools give you that assurance that you are the master of your own life, and it depends on you knowing when and how to use the tools to advance yourself and to overcome the obstacle. The obstacle might be you. You are the biggest obstacle of yourself in many occasions. And then if you have another character on stage, and if that character does not stay there to make it difficult for you to attain your objective, if the other character is being polite to you, he's giving you nothing to work for. I say to the artists all the time, do not give in to the other actor by giving them their objective just because you know what the scene is going to end like. Just because you know what the other character wants, it doesn't mean that you have to give in and allow them to have it. Stay as an obstacle and make the other character, and vice versa, work to overcome the obstacle, to earn the objective, the goal of what it is that you want. If you have no obstacles, if you have just a perfect scene that goes back and forth, like they were talking about, there's no courage. Where does courage have to come in if there's nothing to overcome, right? The three parts to the part X, you can never get rid of part X. Therefore, you can never get rid of pain. You can never get rid of uncertainty. And you can never get rid of continued work. The ongoing training is necessary for you to keep rehearsal and how to know to use the tools so it doesn't take you as long in using them the next time. The same thing for actors. Can you get rid of pain? Are you guaranteed that life is not going to throw pain at you? One day you wake up and you know from this day forward, you know with certainty what's going to happen. You know how your life is going to turn out. No, there are punches that you get in the gut. There's people that you lost. You get sick, God forbid. There's so many things that are coming at you. If you don't have the tools that you can use to make it easier for you to deal with them and to overcome those obstacles, to beat down the villain, the other character, then there's no story. Your story in everyday life stops. You're the main character in your life story. You don't want your life story to stop. So you need to have tools to be able to progress, to be able to get stronger, to be able to get more courageous, to overcome and to beat down the villain inside of you, outside of you, as a human being. I say that all the time. That's being in the moment. You have to be in a place of I don't know as actors. Even though you know the scene that you're playing, you still have to memorize it as the actor, but then you have to let go and you have to imagine that you don't know what you're going to do and what you're going to say next and what obstacles are coming your way as a character. Because that character is not the actor who has memorized the lines and who knows that by the end of the scene, he's going to win. You have to go moment to moment to moment. That's where the definition, that's where the tool of moment to moment, being present as an actor, responding to what the actor is giving you. And if you're lucky enough, you have a great actor who's going to respond to you differently every time. And you're going to have to respond differently to that actor every time. So challenging each other on stage, challenging yourself on stage is something that will make you be more in touch with your courage, with your bravery, than if you had just an easy scene to do and you just get to the objective and there's no obstacles. Moment to moment work, being present and not playing the end of the scene in the beginning of the scene. That's exactly what they're talking about. They're not calling it that. They're calling it part X. And they're not saying moment to moment work as actors because they're not talking about acting. But this is where I make the link between what they're saying and the tools of acting, like I said. I think what I related to from this last segment is about his father wanting him to become a doctor because that would have been the only profession that would have been good enough for his parents. And I think the same thing kind of happened to me when I was in Romania, and then my dad had to sacrifice and leave us without us knowing, leave for America because he was afraid that if he told my mom that he was going to go, then my mom would not be strong enough. And the security police at that time in Romania would have been able to get it out of her that my dad was not coming back. So then my dad left we didn't know what was going to happen. Everybody thought that he had left us, and it wasn't the case because he got us to America as soon as he could within a couple of years. People are asking me, what made you decide that you want to become an actress? At first, I was an actress. I wanted to be a movie star in America. And I think it was my dad mostly telling me that I'm going to be an actress. And my sister, who's a doctor, is going to be a doctor. That's all I remember. I don't remember that there were any other professions, to be honest. I think due to the fact that I was a little bit more sensitive, they assume that being sensitive, you need to do something that's creative, which is acting. And my sister, who was, even though she's my younger sister, she was tougher, she was more rational, she was going to end up being a doctor, and she did become a doctor. So no matter how different we are, no matter where we come from, no matter the age, no matter the difference, if we were to actually pay attention to each other and listen to going back to people that we might not think that we have anything in common with, but if you give that other person a chance, you would realize that there's so much more in common. Like, I don't have anything in common with Dr. Phil Stutz at first, but then having watched this film and realizing that he had the same experience with his dad, where he instilled in him that the only profession that's going to be one that he's going to respect for his son is going to be to be a doctor. It takes me back to the same thing with my father, and having me always think that I was going to be an actress, and that's the only profession out there for me. And then the second thing that I have in common with him, his fear, he talks about the fear, is that he's not going to be able to share these tools that he believes in so much to be helpful to people. He's not going to be able to share them globally. My fear is that I'm not going to be able to share my acting tools, the acting tools, not mine, because I didn't come up with any of them, but the way that I teach them. I've seen so many transformations in so many people, so many cultures, so many backgrounds, so many ages. And my fear is also that I'm never going to be able to share them on a global stage. And that's what I'm working towards. And I still remains as one of my biggest fears. So we have things in common. I have things in common with you, Dr. Stutz, even though at first it doesn't seem like that, you know. And then Jonah Hill, when he was being asked, I didn't know that they have this in common. So Jonah Hill also lost his brother. The roles change. Dr. Stutz is the therapist, but then in this movie, what's so wonderful is that Jonah Hill becomes a therapist, changes roles, and Dr. Stutz becomes the patient, and vice versa. When Jonah Hill was being asked if he wants to talk about the death of his brother, he doesn't want to go there. That also makes me think of acting. There's moments with actors when I work with them, and sometimes the use of the personal loss for some actors who are now ready to go there, you don't push them. The same way that you see Dr. Stutz doesn't push Jonah Hill to go there. He's saying, I'm not ready. I don't want to talk about it. The same thing that I have to do, and I have to be such a great observer of who's ready to go to the personal loss. And if not, then you have to come up with something that's completely different. If you do not want to go into a personal loss or grief or pain, then you have to come up with something that's completely left to the imagination. There's no connection to the personal, because the personal would be too damaging. I remember it was Ellen Burstyn who talked about having to play Medea some years ago. And Medea, the story of Medea is that in order to get revenge for being left by her husband for a younger woman, she knows the most hurt that she can do to her husband is to kill her children. That's the play, Medea. And she was telling us at the Actor Studio, I don't even know if she remembers, this is, again, my recollection of what she was telling us. She couldn't go to a personal link. She didn't even dare to go to a personal link where she could imagine her son having to do something like that to her son, or imagining her son that he would be dead. She couldn't even say those words in relation to her son. She brought in the scene at the Actor Studio, and I remember she was telling us that she brought in, at that time she was vegan, she went to a butcher shop and she brought raw meat with blood in it in a plastic bag, and she put it on the stage, and she decided to do the tool of the acting, which is the animal exercise. So she went into a different direction. She went to another tool, which is the animal exercise tool, being vegan, and she went to physicalize the animal, and she got on her feet, and then she got to the growling, and she did that. And by the time she went to that meat that was center stage at the Actor Studio, and she went to it, and the smell of the rawness, the smell and the sight of the blood was there, Then she took a baseball bat that was a prop, and she said that she used one of those icons from the church. They have icons of the angels, which are like little beautiful looking children with wings, and they're the angels symbols in different religion icons. And all she had to do was to use her imagination, leaving to the side her personal involvement, because she could not involve herself personally. Even an icon, the imagining of the icon, and after doing the animal exercise and getting into her primal self, where there was no more of the rational being used, she was able to take the baseball bat, and she started hitting the air. But in her imagination, it was that beautiful icon of the angel. And even doing that was sufficient for her to get close to somewhat an understanding of what it would be like to play Medea. So it had nothing to do with personal, the same way that Jonah Hill doesn't want to go into his personal because he's not ready. She wasn't ready to go there. And nobody has to be ready to imagine somebody from their lives as having something horrible happen to them. You don't have to go there. Then there's the tools of animal exercise. There's the tools of visualize something that's outside of your life completely, so it doesn't affect you as much, because sometimes it's really difficult to go into the person, or some people are not ready to go into the person, or even if you are ready, you just don't want to go there, and you don't have to. That's what's so beautiful about these tools. There's so many tools that you can choose from. So it's not like method acting provides you with tools that you must go to. You must go into the personal. You must put pain onto yourself by imagining somebody in your personal life have something horrible happen to them. No, there's no rigid way to go about it. It leaves you options with so many tools that you can play with, depending what you need in the moment, without hurting yourself or without hurting other people, emotionally, physically, mentally. Again, they're talking about acting tools, but they're not calling them that. This is the segment where Jonah Hill is just sitting in a chair and he's waiting for Dr. Phil Stutz to come back for the next segment. And I think what was so wonderful about him choosing to put this moment in the film is because one of the exercises that Strasberg came up with at the actor studio was he would put a chair on stage and he would tell the actor, go sit. As soon as the actor would be sitting in the chair, he would ask, okay, but what do you want me to do? And he would say, just sit in the chair. And the actor would sit and move around and shift in the chair. And then he would go, for how long do I sit? What do I go into a monologue? Do you want me to do it? No, just sit. To show that we have such a hard time to just leave ourselves alone without doing anything and just consider ourselves to be worthy of just doing that and boring the audience. Sometimes you're required to just bore the audience, to just sit there. You don't have to come out and prove yourself all the time, because what we tend to do as people in everyday life, and then as actors through the characters, we come and we do so much. We want to do much because all the time in the back of our mind is that we are now worthy to be there. We're not worthy to be here. We got to prove ourselves because of all the expectations that are being placed on our shoulders by ourselves, by our community, by our parents, and now he just chose to actually leave the segment in the film where he's just sitting waiting for Dr. Phil Stutz. And he's a little bit anxious. He's moving. He's not just being still. He's being still in the moment in the beginning, but then he starts to shift his legs because it's hard for anybody. No matter how famous he is, he still has the same issues as all of us do. That's another acting segment that I just caught. I don't know if he thinks it is. I'm not saying that he thinks it is, or I'm not saying he thinks it's not, because I don't know. What did he just do? What did Jonah Hill just do? He did an exercise. He used the tool, which is speaking out. Speaking out for actors is if you are going to do something as a character and you realize that you are faking it, you have no connection with anything that you're doing or saying, and you continue on, that will be bad acting. People will not identify with it because you are putting on a facade of pretending that what's happening with you in the moment is real and true when it's not. So the speaking out is a tool of actors where they have to catch themselves. First of all, they have to be observers of what's happening with themselves. The observer part of you is always going to be on. Sometimes the observer part of you has to be more there than the actor part of you. But the other times it changes, like changing roles, patient, therapist. So he came out and he said to him, he spoke out. The speaking out exercise is, let me let you in what's going on, because we were supposed to do this film and we're pretending to do this film in one session. That was the idea of how he planned to do the film. And then as he got into the practical issues of doing a film, he realized that it was going to take longer than just one session. But they decided to wear the same clothes, the same hairpiece, to show to people that it's one session. In the process of talking about the therapy tools, which are supposed to bring the truth to light, he realized that there was something that he was hiding. So he needed to be able to go into his vulnerability and say, no, I'm not gonna use this facade. I'm not gonna pretend that everything is going well. I'm not gonna pretend that everything is going the way that I expected. Anticipation in actors. Anticipation is the worst thing that you can do. You anticipate that something is going to go one way. And if you stay on that path of anticipation, you're forgetting about being present in the moment. So that's when you're kind of giving up on doing great acting. You're sacrificing great acting because you're afraid to be vulnerable, which he wasn't. He said, this is what's happening. I've been kind of lying to you. This is not going the same way that I thought it was going to go. Here's the set. It's not a set. We have a green screen going behind the scenes a little bit in how the movie's being made. Speaking out, allowing the other person, Dr. Stutz, know of the reality of what he's going through and how the movie is taking a different path than the one that he thought in his perfect mind of imagining how the movie's going to go. What does Dr. Stutz say? Nobody wants perfection. I'm so glad that you revealed that this is not perfect, because guess what? In the imperfection is where greatness comes out. In the vulnerability is where courage comes out. If you would have done something that's perfect, it wouldn't have moved anybody, because there's no such thing. It's only you pretending that it's perfect. If you do it and you want this to be perfect, there's no such thing in our humanity, because our connection to each other globally, universally, is the vulnerability, is the not being perfect. That's what connects us all. So by revealing your vulnerability, you're saying to the world, you can be vulnerable too. Even if you don't have to be an actor, even if you're not in a creative profession, but watching as an audience member, you are being given permission as the audience member from your seat watching a film to be vulnerable and to relate your vulnerability, not as a weakness, but as a place of courage. That's why movie making, that's why acting is so important. It can change lives in the dark of the auditoriums without even hearing a word back from people, but just by the way they sit and watch, their lives can be changed when they walk out of that place. They will have had an understanding again that we need to as people, from the actors, to say, be vulnerable. It's okay that you feel weak, because we all do. So he kind of gave that to the audience right here. Nothing is perfect. This is not perfect. This is not what he seems. Nothing is just what he seems. Speaking out, vulnerability is the connector between us all. And it gives permission to the audience to also be okay with being vulnerable. Contrary to what we were taught in school, that vulnerability is just weakness and you shouldn't show it. Bullshit. None of that is true. Do you remember the unlearning of the bad education that I was talking about? Great. I think what the segment was about also is the fact that, yeah, it's pretty much what I said about vulnerability, being in a place of I don't know. That's pretty much what they would say the actors to do. You don't want to be perfectly knowing of what's going to happen. There's something bigger. Trust that there's something bigger than yourself, and you're there to work for the art in you, not you in the art. So when you're putting you in the art, it becomes just about you. You're bringing art to your comfort zone. So when you're thinking of the art in you, you're letting yourself go to a higher energy, to a higher place that you might not even know that you can reach while you're being grounded. When you're thinking of you in the art, that becomes like a selfish, comfortable safe environment that you don't want to be in. Or if you want to be in that, then don't do acting, do something else. And even in life, like they're saying, you don't want to do that. We have to learn how to be grounded, but at the same time, we have to know how to reach for the dreams, for the stars. Grounding, ground your feet, relax, be aware of the reality, because you never want to lose track of the reality as an actor. But at the same time, once you are grounded in the reality of what is, then let your imagination, let the images, let your senses explore outside of the realm of it's got to be perfect, it's got to be comfortable, it's got to be done this way. Be in the I don't know. It's okay to be in the I don't know and trying to figure out what comes next, beat by beat by beat, because they're going to go into that right now with another tool in therapy, which he calls it the string of pearls, which to me is the little actions that motivate the character to go on to the next beat, to the next beat, to the next beat, in order to fulfill the overall objective, the overall goal. You have to take step by step by step by step, beat by beat by beat. That's what this string of pearls is in acting terms to me. The last part that they were talking about, the string of pearls, that I was actually mentioning prior to their segment, and about the question, who am I, what do I have to do, how do I move forward? That's another question of acting, which Stanislavski came up with. Who am I? The first question. What do I want? All of these are acting tools in so many ways. Beat by beat, that I was talking about, the fact that there's always an obstacle that you have to overcome, and the bigger the obstacle, if you look at it with the bigger the obstacle, the bigger the opportunity is, then you can move on and you can move on. It depends on how you allow yourself to have these tools work for you, but you have to work them. You cannot just say, well, this is the tool that I should be using, but I'm not going to use it. You have to put it in practice and you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to do it. You have to do it on your feet, concrete, in the movement, in the action of doing it. In acting, the way that I've been using the exercise, your shadow can be different parts of you at different stages of your life. Sometimes you have to use the shadow to be kind to it. So then I like to refer to the shadow as the creative little child, the little girl inside of me. The time that I remember myself being 5 years old or 6 years old, and say the things to that little child that I needed so much to hear from the grown-ups, but they unfortunately did not know that that's what I needed. You know, it's not their fault. And there's a book, Alice Miller, and she talks about the fact that whenever we as people talk about our parents, we find the excuse of, yeah, but I don't blame them, because we still feel guilty saying negative things about our parents. But I honestly don't blame my parents or anybody who was in my life for not knowing what the little girl needed, because how are they supposed to know? So one version is that I close my eyes and I relax, which I don't think that they did. Like if you relax in the chair in a way that the chair is supportive of your back so you don't hurt yourself, you put both feet on the ground, you ground yourself, what they were talking about from the previous segment, grounding yourself, and you breathe, focus on your breathing and focus on parts of your body that hold tension, and just releasing the tension in the beginning before you go into the visualization of the shadow, which in this case, I chose it to be the little girl that I need to pay attention to. Not necessarily doesn't mean the little girl is a dark shadow. No, I use it as the light. So I shouldn't call it a shadow. Conversation with the little child, the creative being. And I close my eyes and I focus on the breathing. I inhale through my nose and exhale through my mouth. So I follow Dr. Phil Stutz' direction with Jonah Hill. And then I visualize the beautiful little girl. I go to the little girl because I need some comfort from her. Sometimes you can ask her to guide you as the adult. I'll do this later because I'm not into it right now. Okay, that's it for today.